Please welcome Professor David Ryugo.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for attending. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about hearing loss, and the brain. And the thing about hearing, it all depends on sound. So we'll hear a little bit about what sound is. Now, hearing is the cornerstone of humanity because it allows us to communicate. So it allows us to be social. And humans are very social beings. It's also very important in growth. So in children with hearing loss, it impairs educational performance, which then further impairs their ability to go on to university, which then impairs job opportunities. And so you see this sort of vicious circle going along as if you start out with hearing loss. It's really crucial to learning how to read because we look at a word, we hear the word, we repeat the word, and if we're not repeating the word the way we hear it, it doesn't match what we see in terms of how we phonetically pronounce the word. That will retard hearing or retard learning to read. And what we know is once a child learns to read, they'll read to learn. And that will get them on the course for a lifetime of reading and learning. So it's very important to be able to hear at a very young age. Now in adults, hearing loss will impair job opportunities in many cases, especially if you work around heavy machinery. But the biggest problem, we think, is the fact that it impairs our social life. There's a quality of life that we have that suffers with hearing loss. We know, for instance, that it becomes very difficult to understand speech in noise. So most of my friends, and as I look around the audience, we're about the same age, we will avoid noisy restaurants, or we will not go to parties. And the worst thing that happens is if you start avoiding family reunions or family dinners at holidays because you can't deal with the noise. And so there are very serious issues about quality of life which are affected by hearing loss. Now, let's talk a little bit about sound. Okay, so sound is just vibrations in air. And if we take like a tuning fork, so we take this tuning fork, we bang it, the tines go this way, and it compresses the air, and when it goes that way, it rarefies the air, makes the air. The cycle of compression and rarefaction is the unit frequency. So when the greater the number of cycles, the greater the frequency. Low cycle or low frequency sound, perception of that sound is lower. High frequency sound, our perception of it is higher. And just for reference, I have a piano keyboard here. The lowest note is 27.5 cycles per second. Highest note is 3,186 cycles per second. Most vowels are low frequency, below 3,000 cycles per second. So are low frequency. High frequencies are the consonants, ba, pa, da. And we, as a group, probably have lost high frequency hearing. Listening, consonants. Okay, so we're going to miss a lot of words. Now, the great thing about the brain, guess what you're saying. So if we're talking about versus weather or a wedding, the words we use will be very different, and the brain will extract that and help when we have hearing loss. So one thing about sound is frequency, and frequency, as we'll come back to, is very important. The other component, and so in a way analogous to how rain breaks down light into the colors of the rainbow, our ear breaks down sound into the audible frequencies. Frequency is important because all sounds are composed of frequencies, especially words, okay? All words are is speech, sounds strung together over time. Okay? So different sounds are composed of different frequencies. If I speak, it's because I'm changing the frequency composition of the words as I speak. Sound also has energy or loudness, and we measure loudness or we pressure waves. And so this is the most difficult part of sound because we can detect sound over 7 orders of magnitude, from the very softest whisper to the jet engine. The problem with sound is that it's like radiation or X-rays, violet light. In little bits, it's harmless, but it accumulates over time, and that's why many of us who've grown up in an industrialized society, who've been exposed to noise and sirens and jackhammers and clubs and concerts, are high-frequency hearing, because it's all due to noise exposure. So what it says is anything above 95 decibels should be avoided. So when I walk down the street and a siren goes by, I cover my ears. If I walk by a jackhammer, I cover my ears. Because I know I'm going to start losing my hearing. And hearing loss is bad in that sense because it's estimated that 75% of Australians over the age of 70 hearing loss. With the life expectancy drifting into the 80s, that means for many of us, we'll spend the last decade of our life with this. That's, to me, that's shocking. It's a frightening prospect to think about the last decade of our life having trouble listening to our grandparents, spouses, or to our friends. Very important, this aspect of hearing. And the third component of the sound is timing. Sound has an onset, an offset, a duration, and my speech is modulated over time. And this modulation over time determines the way I pronounce words, the way I speak, defines the Morse code, it defines the melody of a music. So what we have is sound, frequency, intensity, and timing all get collected by the ear, processed by the brain to bring us bits of important information. At a very basic level, we want to detect sound, then vocalize that sound. Is it coming from the right or the left? We orient our head to that sound, and then we process. What is it? Is it a bus? Is it a friendly person? Is it a predator? Is it a foe? Okay, so these are the things we're processing all the time about sound. Back in the old days, when we were living in caves, it provided us with safety because it was a way of hearing things, detecting things in our environment that we couldn't see, either at night or if the grass was too dense. All right, so it evolved to make sure that we were able to detect things besides just vision, because vision works well in the light. Touch, if you're being touched by a predator, it's too late. You want to hear that predator, right? So we need those distance senses to survive to where we are now. So now we want to talk a little bit about the ears. Okay, this is just a regular ear. It's like my right ear. Sound is collected by the pinna, funneled into the ear canal, where it vibrates the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. These vibrations are then transferred by the middle ear ossicles into the inner ear. The inner ear is a working part of hearing. That's where the sensory receptors are. Now, if we pick the bone off, we can look down into the working part of the ear, which is shown here. The working part of the ear has 4 rows of sensory receptors that are strung along about 25 centimeters of an elastic membrane. So we have roughly, the really important part of our hearing is about 3,000 hair cells. They're called hair cells because the little hairs on the ends. You can't really see the hair cells, so we'll look a little bit higher than that. In this little box, what we're looking at now are the tips of the hair cells. Okay? There's 3 rows of outer hair cells that serve in a way that we still don't quite understand, but these inner hair cells are the ones that are really important. They're the ones that deflect when mechanical energy enters the ear, and they're the ones that convert that mechanical energy into neural signals that are used by the brain. So, why do we care about these hair cells? Here's a normal hearing ear. You see the beautiful, very sort of crystalline nature, an organized nature of the hair cells. We're just looking at the tips of the hair cells, but we know that they're very well organized. But in cases of noise damage, we can see the damage. It's very obvious that there's damage. Missing, or the little hairs that are so organized here are kind of frayed and disarrayed. And this is what noise does. Okay, so this is why we want to protect our hearing. Now, like I said, we have roughly 3,000 hair cells and 30,000 auditory nerve fibers bringing information into the brain. So I sort of model it like this. So we're not going to worry about these outer hair cells anymore. We're just going to look at these inner hair cells, these auditory nerve fibers. So the beauty of the system is that there's redundancy. Each hair cell is innervated by 10 to 15 auditory nerve fibers, or brain cells. And they're the ones, these are the cells that convey sound information into the brain. Now the brain does all the heavy lifting, okay? But it's getting high density information about our acoustic environment, okay? Sort of like high definition television that we see with our vision. When you think about sound, my voice has a pattern. There will be, at some level, there will be some kind of emphasis, boredom or excitation, or enthusiasm in the way I speak. And you'll see that also in when you have a conversation with friends or family. There are a lot of details to speak. And it's important, it very much enriches how we think about things, especially if we're listening to music. Because with music, there are the violins, there are the oboes, there are the bassoons, there are the cellos, there's the brass. These are all the components of an orchestral performance that we extract with our ears. As we lose hearing, we're not going to be able to make those distinctions. Same way we'll lose the details. So it's like, if we have high density innervation, normal hearing ears, we're going to get a very rich acoustic environment. You know? Very rich. It's like a very rich visual experience when you look at the opera house. But not just when you look at the opera house, you can see not full here. At this point, on the back. Clouds. All right, so it's not just the opera house per se, it's the experience of what else is going on with the opera house. When we have hearing loss, we're losing the channels that bring information into our brain. X is marked where there's loss. Mark the fact that the number of channels entering the brain goes down. We have a pixelated acoustic environment. Yes, you can recognize the opera house because it's iconic. And you've learned it, you remember it from memory. But you can't see people. Light post anymore. You don't know the background. So with hearing loss, all the details and the rich variety of sounds that we experience get lost. The thing is, we don't always recognize it, okay? Hearing over time. You might not notice that you're losing high frequencies. Like if you hear a cymbal, you're playing on a cymbal, it'll last for a long time. But it'll dampen very rapidly because you just won't hear those. So, the point of all this is, if we even if we amplify this version of the opera house, acoustic opera house, it's not going to make it clearer. It's going to make a fuzzy sound louder. And that's the dilemma. Using glasses to improve vision works because we're correcting the lens. And these glasses correct for the lens. Okay? And most of us have to wear glasses. With hearing loss, there is no lens. It's the cells, the neural components are being lost. So, strictly speaking, it's very hard to imagine how hearing aids and cochlear implants work because they're working with a smaller population of cells. So, that means is, in the end, is that yes, you can use assisted devices. They tend to work primarily in quiet. Because the thing that the brain does when it's normal, and when we have normal hearing, is it is exquisitely sensitive to extracting signals from noise. In fact, that's what the brain does, whether it's touch or smell, vision or hearing. The brain extracts signals from noise. We learn what those signals are by calling sort of noise that which is not important to us. Signals which are important, we attend to. That which we don't care about, we call noise. Okay? So, what do we do? Okay? Because I don't want to give a negative sense or a depressing sense about hearing, because there's lots of things we can do. Now, for many of us, whatever we've done during our lifetime, it's too late. Or who we are and the amount of hearing loss we had. But we can talk to our children, we can talk to our grandchildren, we can talk to our neighbors. We can talk to anyone about how they must save their hearing, protect their hearing from loud sounds. If it seems loud to you, then it's probably going to be damaging, because if you have hearing loss, you need louder sounds. And louder sounds, in an ironic way, damages the ear. If you think you have hearing loss, you want to get your hearing tested. Have need for assisted devices, you should use them, because there's plenty of evidence growing now that if you have hearing loss and you don't attend to it, the hearing loss will progress and your brain will change. And the brain will change in a way to try to compensate for those hearing losses. It's not necessarily a productive change. A lot of brain changes with associated with hearing loss are destructive or distracting. So, if you have a hearing loss, you want to know about it. Okay? You don't want to become socially isolated. You don't want to avoid your friends. And we also know that hearing loss is linked to social life. It's also linked to depression. And you are 5 times more at risk to having early onset dementia if you have hearing loss and you don't attend to it. So, I think the main thing is if you have hearing loss, attend to it, because it will help. It will certainly work in quiet. And the main thing about hearing aids and cochlear implants is don't have unreal expectations. It will never be as good as what Mother Nature gave us. Mother Nature allows us to extract really complicated signals out of it. One voice out of a babble in a cafeteria. Looked at it in a spectrogram, it would look like this one big black splotch, okay? But our brain is able to extract it. So what we want to do is protect our hearing. If we need assisted devices, you want to use it. And you want to have realistic expectations of what an assisted device can do, because in fact, it's really complicated.